Trent Condon back with you once again here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Again, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen each and every day. Your team every day here on Locked On Iowa. So the news is official now as we got to piece things together, and it is Kaden Proctor officially is no longer an Iowa Hawkeye commit. He has verbally committed now to Alabama. He will officially sign on the dotted line tomorrow, and everything is over as it pertains to that. Now, this is nothing short of a devastating blow to Iowa football. It's not a death knell. It's not changing the program and the trajectory and things like that. But you look at the future and the way things were set up. Recruiting had gone incredibly well. Of course, the transfer portal to this point has been very good with the commitments of Cade McNamara and Eric All. You're feeling good about that. We know they need more wide receivers. We know we need a competent offensive coordinator. We know we need these things still to happen in order to have this offseason at least pointed in a positive direction. But that aside, one of the pieces that we've been talking about now for months and months, and the hope for change and a hope for the future of an Iowa offense that can at least become competent once again, was knowing that you were going to have your tackle position in very good hands. Mason Richman played well, really well at times during his sophomore campaign after starting as a freshman a year ago, coming in this season, being the starter, and really one of the few bright spots of this offensive line this season was the play of Mason Richman. That's not to say he was great. He wasn't. But he was, of a bad group, the best of that bad group this season. And then you couple him going into 2023 with Kadyn Proctor, who at 6'7", 360 pounds, good feet, an ability to move, a road grader on the offensive line with Caleb Johnson in the backfield, Cade McNamara at quarterback. You were feeling good that this was going to be heading in a positive direction. But Proctor was a huge part of that. And now he's no longer part of the plans. He is not going to be there. So not only does that impact Iowa, all right, you lose a starter in the offensive line. Again, not something that's going to be a program killer. They're not going to shut it down. They're not tearing down Kinnick Stadium. We don't want to go too hyperbolic here. But Iowa's got work to do now. And Iowa has to figure out what they're going to do at the offensive tackle position. They have to figure out what they're going to do in the transfer portal. Because right now, it is scary. Iowa has Mason Richman. Good. And then who else at tackle? Who else do you feel good about? Jack Plum? We saw him. Not good enough. He comes back for another year. Okay. A depth piece? Maybe. But that's about it. Nick DeYoung? Come on. It's not good enough. And now Iowa has to figure out on the fly what they're going to do. They need to go into the portal now, and they have to find a ready-made offensive tackle that can come in day one and can be a starter for them. Now, who's in the portal for the most part? Sure, there's talented guys, but they're going to cost money. It's not going to be free. That's a part. And Iowa Swarm, the collective, is going to have to go out, and they're going to have to put that money up. So that's one component of it. But secondly, you have a guy that you believe can come in and not only just be a guy that's good enough to be a tackle in the Big Ten and be a starter on that offensive line on a team that has a real possibility of being the prohibitive favorite in the Big Ten West going into next season. But they got to be able to pick up whatever you're trying to do. If it's a change in the offensive philosophy, if it's tweaks, if it's changes, or even if it is just the Kirk Ferentz system and everything that we've seen in the past, well, it's still a pretty complicated system. So you have that component. Running the zone blocking scheme, one of the biggest parts is understanding your assignments, yes, but also working in continuity with the rest of that offensive line. So you're looking at new pieces there. Is it going to be a guy that's going to be ready to go for spring? Again, damaged goods a lot of times is what you're finding. Guys coming off injury, very well could be the case there. What are they going to be ready to do come spring practice? So you're picking up the playbook. You're doing all these different things. This is a huge blow. Now, Kaden Proctor is going to Alabama, and they got other talented guys there. I mean, they have other players that are going to be in right away and are going to be incredibly good and incredibly talented. In fact, I think I saw it was the number 5 and number 7 ranked tackles in the country going into this class are also ready to go and have already committed to Alabama on top of it. Look, we got to let him go. And for Kaden, good for him. If it's more money, so be it. If their collective was able to pay more to Kaden Proctor, absolutely got no problem with that. If his ability to play for national championships, got no problem with that. Or if it was looking at this offense down 6 years of ineptitude, Ryan Ferentz, and said, you know what? I'm not going to go play for that garbage. I'm going to go and play for the 130th country. I'm not going to go out and play for this system because I don't believe it is good enough. Alabama puts dudes in the pros, and they certainly do it at the offensive line at a level just as good as Iowa. Now, we can argue merits, we can go back and forth, but ultimately, they're not going to miss him. Like, the NFL's not going to miss him because he's at Alabama. Will it take a little longer to get on the field? Could be the case. A chance to develop, reshape that body, get 100%, get a year of tape. That's all it takes. That's all it takes at Alabama to get out there and maybe along the way win a national championship or two. It's not a bad cutoff. Let's not make this all about Kadyn Proctor. Let's make this about Iowa. And Iowa's inability to be able to sell him, not just on the money aspect. And I know that's the way that a lot of people want to go. And they just want to point out money. Like, you can't have it both ways. The reason that Cade McNamara committed to Iowa, it's because of money. Be honest. It's because the collective was able to put together a collection of money that got him to commit right away to Iowa. That was happening well before he was officially in the transfer portal, as we saw how quickly that came together. Same thing for Eric Gall. You can't have it both ways. Collective is good, it's bad. No, it is what it is. This is the environment. And if Kirk Ferentz can't live in this environment, first of all, I have my own questions. I love Kirk Ferentz. I respect him as a coach and what he's done with this Iowa program and what his 24 years have been. And some of the best sport moments of my life as a sports fan have come because of Kirk Ferentz and what he has done. But what we continue to see with this Iowa program and his inability to see that he has a son running his offense that, first of all, didn't have a resume to get that job. Secondly, is unfireable to Kirk Ferentz because it is his son. Nepotism is a terrible thing. And there is a reason that the University of Iowa has laws and rules and regulations in place to stay away from nepotism because of what we're dealing with right now. And as teams across the country and across the Big Ten landscape are making moves and bringing in coordinators, the team that they're going to see in Kentucky coming up in the bowl game that nobody cares about in 11 days, as that is happening and they're making moves. And I was sitting here in their old school of thinking and not doing a thing. In fact, if Iowa's circumstances were the exact same thing, except it was not Brian Ferentz, it was Brian Jones, it was Brian Johnson, it was Brian Condon, whatever it is, that manned this ship and had 6 years and took an offense that already had its own set of issues and made it worse over 6 years, you think he'd be coaching the bowl game? I don't. That's why nepotism is a bad thing. And that's why Iowa is in a very difficult spot right now. Back to Kaden Proctor and what this means for Iowa. They got to get back in the portal. Sean Bach over at 24/7 Sports, he's got an article out about a D2 prospect that Iowa is getting back involved with, but he's already committed to Virginia. All right. How quickly are you going to be able to make that flip? How quickly can you get him on campus? A dead period is coming. You have all these things that are happening right now all together. Iowa has put themselves in a difficult spot. This is on Iowa. I know a lot of people want to blame Kaden Proctor. Did he put Iowa in a bad spot? Yes, he did. There's no doubt. But that's what the money's for. I said this the other day. That's why you're paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why you're paid millions of dollars if you're Kirk Ferentz, because these things aren't easy. That's what the money's for. Figure it out. You don't want to fire coaches in season, so be it. But you're going to have to live with the consequences. And the consequences right now is Iowa is in trouble. Iowa's in trouble at the offensive tackle position. Iowa's in trouble in a year that they, again, should have been conference champions this year if they were just competent on the offense. They weren't able to do it. It's a problem. We'll take our final timeout. Come back with more here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Talking a little hoops, Kris Murray. This episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by NHTSA. Did you know driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're high, you're wrong. Friends can tell, coworkers can tell, even your parents can, everyone can tell. So, what do you think the law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So, even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. The bottom line is if you feel different, you drive different. Driving high is driving influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA. Trent Condon with you one final time here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Again, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your each and every day. So, voice is struggling a little bit, feeling the cold coming on. Apologies as we bat our way through. Disappointing news on the Kadyn Proctor front. Iowa's got to figure it out and got to do it in a hurry because guess what? Second semester starts here in just a few weeks. Want to have guys on campus. It is a team that is not built right now with lots of tackles, and a team wants to run the football with Caleb Johnson. Oh boy, that's just a little bit of a trouble. Let's talk some Iowa basketball here to wrap things up. Iowa, their game tomorrow against Eastern Illinois, that has been shifted to an afternoon game. If you're just catching this, that'll be a 2:30 kickoff tip off against Eastern Illinois, a game that has been moved up. The women's game will also be played at noon. So we'll have an action podcast coming up for you, as that one will be on BTN Plus. We'll watch that one and get that out to you as quickly as we can tomorrow afternoon. So we got some news today. Fran McCaffrey talked to the assembled media over in Iowa City. Couple of nuggets that came out. The most important, though, is about Kris Murray and Kris Murray, his availability going forward. So we speculated about, it's a plantar fasciitis issue. He's dealing with that and something that is more than likely going to be lingering. You talk to people that have had this kind of injury. You look at athletes that have had this injury in the past, and you certainly see that that is something that is impactful and it takes a long time to get back from. It's not something where even a few weeks of rest is going to make it great. Now, can it make it better? Absolutely. Rest, getting off your feet. You saw him in the walking boot in the Wisconsin game. Minimum, that is something that is going to help, but it doesn't be completely healed. And that's what we don't know. Is this something where every couple of weeks it flares up a little bit more? There's going to be an extra games that he's going to have to sit out at different points during the course of the season. Honestly, that's a very likely scenario that you're going to see whenever he comes back, be it against Nebraska, be it against Penn State, or back home when they play Indiana. Whenever it turns out to be, that doesn't mean this thing is completely fixed. This doesn't mean that all of a sudden Kris Murray is going to go out there is going to be the guy that we saw before the Duke game. He's scoring 20 points a game, grabbing 10 rebounds, hitting three-pointers, getting to the rim, doing those things. It doesn't mean that automatically he just, A, becomes the player that he was, but secondly, that it doesn't flare up again and he has to take another week off. A very real possibility. The Big Ten this year is not great. I know Purdue's number one in the country. I don't see it being a sustainable model. And certainly I know when my brackets come out, at least as I look at it right now, I'm not going to have Purdue as a Final Four team. Zach Edey, he's a beast. He's a behemoth. But even to get to a Final Four, you got to win 4 consecutive games, obviously, to get there. One's against the 16 seed if you're a 1 seed, against the 8-9, against a 4 or 5, 12 or 13 in the Sweet 16, whoever comes out of the bottom side of the bracket. Still, Purdue doing this with basically outside of Edey, a completely new lineup, a completely new roster. Peter, yes, he does a great job, but also dig a little deeper into those wins. Beating Gonzaga, this is not the same Zags team that we've certainly seen over the last 5 years. Duke, we saw Duke, right? Iowa didn't play that well. They had chances to get back in that game. Will Duke be good at the end of the season? You can argue that, and we can get there, but ultimately, I want to see more out of Purdue. And again, you're playing with 2 freshman guards, 2 guys that were not even ranked in the top 75 nationally. Sustainability. Indiana, you saw them get blown out by Kansas. It was a road game, but still, they lost by 20-some points in that game. They're okay. But when you're talking about national landscape, it's all right. Ohio State let a lead slip away against North Carolina, and on and on and on. This league is deep, but it isn't top heavy. And because of that, very well the difference between Iowa, say going 12-8 in conference this year, and already off to a 0-1 start, and being 9-11, it's not that deep. One bad week or one injury again to Kris Murray and him having to sit out even longer, that's going to be a problem. That is a concerning component to this Iowa basketball team. The good news is, though, Fran says he is going to be back, and he's going to be back relatively soon. So we have that component to be excited about, certainly with it, and we will talk about that a whole lot more. He says real possibility he'll be back for the Nebraska game. So here's the way that I look at it, and I don't know. I'm not a doctor, although I went to college for a long time. I'm not a doctor, and look at it this way. Your first Big Ten game back after this game against Eastern Illinois tomorrow afternoon on the 29th, Nebraska's not good. If they're not the worst team in the conference, they're battling with Minnesota in the bottom part. You would hope. I know it's a road game. I know that it's going to be filled up because that's what they do, and that's what they do in Lincoln, and they fill it up, and it doesn't matter if it's volleyball or football or basketball, they fill that place up. It's going to be a tough environment. If you can't win that game, though, minus Kris Murray, we might be having a different conversation. If you sneak by, and I know it's a tough if, and it's a huge ask for a group to go in there with a lot of new faces and try to win a road game in the Big Ten. Nebraska, they're not good. They're okay at times. Shows you again the depth of this league. I mean, they throttled Creighton, who was a top 10 team preseason. Now they haven't lived up to the billing of that point, but and then Penn State. See, Penn State, I know a lot of people are trying to throw them in the mix with the Minnesotas and the Nebraskas of the Big Ten this year. I don't see it. This Penn State team, they are deep, they are talented, they are old. In fact, the oldest team in terms of age in all of college basketball. That's one I don't think you can afford. If it's close, I'd be pushing more for Murray coming back in that one. But again, you're playing the great unknown. And then after that, it's Indiana. And that front line that the Hoosiers have, Trace Jackson Davis and company. We know Philip Rebracha. I mean, he is the only component inside at this point in time. It's a tough spot to be right now. But we know Iowa opens as a 30.5-point favorite against Eastern Illinois. So offshore, that number has come out. A big favorite. You love those first half overs. 147 the opening total, too. All over the over in that one. Now, this Eastern Illinois team, we've seen bad teams. We've seen these bye games and some of the worst of college basketball come through Carver Hawkeye Arena throughout the years. This team is brutal. They might be the worst of the worst. That's how bad Eastern Illinois is this year. Iowa will show up. They will win for efficiency numbers as it pertains to the net rating, which now the NCAA uses as opposed to the old RPI. You hope that they're just able to go out there, absolutely dominate, and get the victory, and they will. That's how bad this Eastern Illinois team, Iowa, could play poorly again. Keep getting Peyton Sandford going. Keep that confidence rising. They're going to need him the rest of the way. Let's get Tony Perkins going a little bit after struggling a bit on Saturday night. We'll be back with you tomorrow afternoon after the game, after Iowa easily dispatches Eastern Illinois. And it will be tomorrow signing day. No, Kaden Proctor will not be a part of it on the football front. There are plenty of prospects to talk about, and we will do that as well. Busy week continues here on Locked On Hawkeyes as we lead into, of course, Christmas holiday. Hope everybody is out there getting ready for it, enjoying it. I got Christmas shopping to do. In fact, right now, gotta go take the kids over, see a little Santa Claus. We'll be doing that, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Tough news today with Kadyn Proctor, something we knew was coming over the last couple of days still. Hawkeye fans, I get it. It stings. Hawkeye coaches now get to figure it out. It's on you at this point in time. We'll talk to you again tomorrow on Locked On Hawkeyes. Go Hawks.